Tonight on Canton Confidential, Week 8 of testimony, taking us back to the night in question.
Mr. O'Keefe was projected forward and to the left along the front yard of 34 Fairview Road.
From crash reconstruction to that alleged Google search.
I can leave it for several hours, for several days, for several weeks. The time difference is not really important.
Evidence under scrutiny.
I didn't put the evidence there.
And a relationship seemingly on the edge.
So you're not into this anymore?
We're breaking it all down right now on Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
We are now in week 8 of testimony with the trial still in the hands of the prosecution. Thanks for being with us. For Canton Confidential, I'm Glenn Jones. JC has the night off. Before we get into the big moments from today, let's quickly recap last week's headlines. Monday started with testimony from State Police Sergeant Yuri Buchanan. The defense asked him again about inverted video showing Karen Reed's SUV inside the Canton Police garage. Then we heard briefly from Dighton Police Sergeant Nicholas Barrows. He testified that he saw Karen Reed's SUV taillight cracked, but, quote, not completely damaged. But it was State Trooper Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in the case, that grabbed everyone's attention. Trooper Proctor admitted to texting graphic, offensive, and unprofessional messages about Karen Reed and his murder investigation to family, to friends, and to coworkers.
I text my wife waiting to lock this whack job up. Yes, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though.
I'm going through his client's phone right now, correct?
Yes, after the picture, sir, yes.
Who's the client?
I was referring to Miss Reed.
Proctor apologized for the messages, but said they had no impact on his ability to investigate the case fairly. After Proctor was State Police Lieutenant Brian Tully. He recounted the driving route he believed Karen Reed took the hours around John O'Keefe's death. We also heard a lot of testimony on DNA from law enforcement and forensic experts. They testified that they connected DNA on Karen Reed's vehicle to O'Keefe. Friday started with a juror being dismissed. By the end of the day, we heard from a digital expert and a state police accident reconstructionist. That brings us to today. Testimony started with that same witness. Trooper Joe Paul was questioned about what measurements and data he used during calculations to reconstruct the accident. We also heard from a project manager at Celebrite on Jennifer McCabe's Google searches, and another state trooper on text messages between John O'Keefe and Karen Reed. Those text messages were a big highlight from today, something we hadn't seen before. Let's send things out to Kirsten Glavin. She's live in Denham with a summary of the big moments you need to know about from today's testimony. Kirsten.
Well, Glenn, those text messages read aloud today once again signaled relationship trouble between O'Keefe and Reed leading up to his death. Reed's defense has consistently said this was more of a lover's quarrel. Back on the stand Monday for a cross-examination, Trooper Joe Paul, a Massachusetts State Police crash reconstructionist.
Hold any degrees in the scientific discipline of biomechanics?
No.
How about in engineering?
No.
How about in kinematics?
No.
What's the highest degree that you do hold, sir?
I have an associate's degree.
Trooper Paul grilled about his qualifications and later asked about how John O'Keefe's drinking glass and cell phone could have stayed with his body as he was allegedly struck and thrown 30 feet from Reed's vehicle.
Somehow, as he landed, tucked that cell phone underneath his body so he landed on top of it.
It just did. That's the evidence at the scene. I didn't put the evidence there, so.
Well, you didn't.
All right. Injuries also in question.
How do you account for the fact that you didn't suffer a broken bone?
I don't know.
Still, the trooper doubling down on his take that scratches on O'Keefe's arm came from the broken taillight.
The dent with the scratches above it is consistent with a hand holding a glass and the glass on top, smashing on the vehicle, and the hand smashing the vehicle.
Next on the stand, a digital forensic expert for Celebrite.
The original question is just basically how can we explain this 227 timestamp?
The expert testifying that the Google search made by Jennifer McCabe, "How's long to die in the cold," was not made at 2:27 a.m. and was never deleted.
I'm of no doubt that the only time those two searches were conducted was at 6:23 and 6:24.
Reed's defense implying the data was manipulated. Last to testify, Trooper Nicholas Guarino reading tense text messages between Reed and O'Keefe.
So you're not into this anymore. And then John says, not into fighting all the time, correct.
Leading up to his death.
Your kids are cucking alone. 1:29, 1:04 a.m. I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone.
Outside of court, Reed's defense saying she never went home.
She was upset because he never came out of the house. She did not realize he had been brutally beaten almost to death at that point.
Reed's defense also tells us they plan to start presenting their side of this case by the end of this week. Jurors will be back here for more testimony on Thursday. Glenn?
Kirsten, thank you. That Mansfield question that you were talking to Alan Jackson about was one we actually got from a viewer. You helped us to get answers outside of court. Back here in the station, we're joined by former prosecutor Catherine Loftus, also known on TikTok at Note My Objection. So why don't we start with those text messages that were introduced into evidence at the end of the day. A lot of context there about the quality of their relationship, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. Did you hear anything in those text messages that go to the Commonwealth's motive that Karen Reed wanted to kill him?
So they don't actually have to prove motive. What they do have to prove as part of the second-degree homicide charge is intent. I don't see anything contained within those text messages that leads to that. I do think, like you said, it gives a little bit more context because what we've heard is a lot of testimony about different witnesses who talked about their good relationship. And I think, as anyone knows, the public-facing relationship is often very different from the private relationship. So I do think it might give a little bit of context to the jury to explain maybe what was really going on behind the scenes, not only that day, but in the bigger picture of their relationship.
Yeah, I guess in a courtroom, in a way, you want the jury to internalize this as putting themselves into the story. Perhaps all of us can relate to having a relationship that faces stresses. Rarely does it motivate somebody to kill somebody.
No, and it. Again, we haven't seen all of it. The Commonwealth, Adam Lally, started to present these text messages towards the end of the day. And I thought we had a little bit of momentum, and then he seemed to, there was a little bit of paper shuffling and wasn't sure where to go next. I wasn't clear whether he was trying to run out the clock a little bit to leave the jurors with certain text messages. But I do think that it showed that maybe there's a little bit more background that we should be paying attention to that hasn't been the focus of the case so far. Do I think it proves, why she wanted to allegedly kill him or hit him or the intent? No, I don't. But I do think it helps give a little bit of context.
All right, let's talk quickly about the testimony of Trooper Joe Paul. He's the accident reconstructionist with state police. On cross, do you think he held up well enough to uphold the Commonwealth's theory that Karen Reed used her car to kill her boyfriend?
I think he had a tough time on both direct and cross-examination, if I'm being totally honest. He came across to me like he was a bit nervous from the moment he started questioning, even from Adam Lally on Friday. I think that often there are, different types of personalities that are more well-prepared, more able to kind of answer the aggressiveness that comes with cross-examination. Do I think that, and he struggled on cross, do I think that negates all of the data that came out through the Commonwealth? I don't, but it hurt it a little bit.
Yeah. So you think the story that he shared through his investigative report is a narrative that the jury could go along with?
I do think so. I think that some of the, sometimes you have to dig through the weeds of what the lawyers are asking, because the questions, as the judge always says, aren't evidence, what the witness says. And the data from the car, nobody's really refuting, the defense is not disputing that the data from the car is accurate. And I think, the miles per hour in reverse and the odometer, and that it didn't change in the slight decrease in mile per hour while the acceleration was still going. I think, from my perspective, the defense expert needs to explain, what does that mean? If it doesn't mean she hits somebody or something, how else do you explain that? So I think if you can dig through it, it is helpful.
And the kind of scientific evidence you've been desperate for so far in this case.
Right.
Yeah. All right. When we come back, our courtroom insider Sue O'Connell will join us to share juror reactions to some of today's biggest moments. A reminder, you can watch all of our episodes on our website or YouTube page. And we are not only on your screen. You can listen to us whenever you want. Get our podcast. Just search Canton Confidential. We'll be right back.
So he gets hit by the car, not his torso, just the arm. The taillight cracks, and as it passes by, his arm stays with it long enough to get striations, those scratches that we see, those lacerations, those abrasions that we see, right?
In a sense, yes.
And at the same time, he does a pirouette and flies 30 feet to his final point of rest.
I don't know if he did a pirouette.
Well, I'm using the word pirouette. He spun around.
He started rotating counterclockwise.
That's defense attorney Alan Jackson challenging the theory of the prosecution's crash expert who determined John O'Keefe was killed by a vehicle. Our courtroom insider Sue O'Connell is with us now. In the last segment, Catherine told us sometimes the jury has to sift through the weeds in order to get to the hard information. How's the sifting going for the jury? Are you able to tell when you look at their reactions?
Yes, especially in that moment right there that we just watched. There was one juror who we've been watching a lot, and she just shook her head like, again, we don't know what it is. Is she shaking her head that this is terrible, it happened to John O'Keefe?
Or because it's implausible.
Terrible that it's implausible that it happened, or is it just, whatever it is. There is reaction to this testimony that's been going on. Again, it's also been complicated. We keep looking at these pieces of glass and putting it together. But when you look at the entire map laid out and you're trying to put the distance in it, again, these jurors cannot take their notebooks home. They can't do independent research. So a lot of them are writing down a lot of data, I guess, in hopes that when they go in to deliberate, they'll have the information that they have. But they are paying attention. Sometimes they're getting very bored.
Yeah, I imagine so.
I think.
All right, let's talk about the text messages that came out late today, especially because last week we heard Trooper Proctor's text messages, and they revealed so much about him. But the text messages we heard today, I'm not sure how much they revealed. I don't know. As I said to Catherine, I'm not sure if these are the normal stresses of a relationship or something more. What's your take?
So I think what the jury is going to have to take away from this is, yes, these text messages, if nothing had happened to John O'Keefe, if he were alive and well today, and he and Karen either were still together or they broke up, you might look at this, it's sort of like, hey, I got really mad at you for what you did this morning. I'm mad at you too. Don't forget to pick up milk. Don't forget the nephew has to go to the doctor. Be careful, it's going to be a blizzard out there. There was just sort of the everyday stuff, along with, the fact that we found that Karen called him a super number of times between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., and John was not answering the phone. And they were talking about breaking up, but he said he's sorry, and he said, what do you want me to do? I'm still sorry. So it was kind of a window into a relationship. She said it was feeling toxic. Do you want to just leave me? And again, if nothing had happened to John O'Keefe, you might just look at that like, well, it's just everybody has these sort of relationships. The jury was paying close attention to these messages. I feel bad for the trooper who had to read them out loud.
He seemed not to enjoy it.
He did not, and he had a hot mic moment, which I think we all can sympathize with. And I often wonder, why can't we just hire people to come in and read these text messages? It might have had a deeper impact if this trooper didn't feel like this was a burden he had to do. But again, it's building up to something that we think is coming. So again, to the earlier point, maybe if we had gotten the payoff on the voicemails that we know are coming, it might have meant a lot. Now the jurors have a couple of days. They're not going to be back in court until Thursday. So they'll be thinking about this text message and exchange. And we all bring our own biases to this. Sure. Like, if you've had relationships with this, you might think it's normal, or you think it's just somebody who acts that way. If you've never had a relationship where you've broken up, or you think someone's cheating on you, or you have issues where you have to call someone a million times, or you have to be in a relationship with someone who calls you a million times, it may seem strange. But again, John O'Keefe ended, that night dead by the morning, and that's the tragedy here, and that's what shapes the entire text exchange.
Okay, Sue O'Connell, thanks. Sue teed up an important moment that's coming. We expect to hear those voicemail messages before the prosecution rests its case, and it's nearing the end of its case. We'll be right back after this. We're back now with our courtroom insider, Sue O'Connell, and local attorney, Catherine Loftus. Note my objection on TikTok. All right, let's get to some viewer questions because we get so many of these. The first one is from Christine. She wants to know, will the defense be able to tell the jury that the FBI is investigating the investigation? Catherine, why don't you handle that one?
Christine, the answer is no. And the reason for that is that there has been no conclusion to the investigation, right? So we have a federal grand jury that has been open for what we know is at least 18 months to 2 years. We don't have any information whether it's still active, whether it's been closed. There's no indictments that have come out from it. So you can't use information that is essentially has not come to a conclusion. It's the same reason why they can't talk about specifically the internal affairs investigation into Proctor, because unless and until, if an indictment had come out against one of the troopers or against Brian Higgins, absolutely they could talk about that. The idea that we can use sort of pending investigations in court against someone when they have not come to a conclusion is not really fair to either side.
But some of the depositions from those proceedings have been used in this court case, right?
Yes. So they're actually not depositions, but they're grand jury testimony. So many of these witnesses have testified both in the state grand jury as well as the federal grand jury. And because any time that you testify under oath, you can use that, any party can use that to impeach a witness if there is inconsistent statements. So if somebody testifies to something that was inconsistent with their prior statement, that's why they say, you testified in a previous hearing, correct? And you said this, correct? So the jury can clearly understand that there's something else going on, but we can't actually just say, you're being investigated by the FBI, right?
Gotcha. All right, Sue, let's go to another viewer question. This one is for you. It comes from Judy, and she wants to know, who is the person sitting behind Yannetti in the courtroom each day, and what is his job?
That's Craig, and Craig does this for a living, and I hope we're going to get to talk to Craig after the trial is all done. He is hired by the defense, and he goes from trial to trial organizing just the defense's audio-visual materials.
Gotcha.
So far, I think we've only seen a few things that he's done, but when the defense takes over, I imagine we're going to see a lot more. But he is on camera all the time, and he's a very nice person who sits there politely and quietly and gets everything done and gets it right up there. The prosecution, the Commonwealth, has their own person who does it as well. You can't see her because she's in front of the judge, but each team has their own people to work the audio-visual stuff.
I want to see if I can get quickly to two other things with both of you. One of them came from the crash reconstructionist. In his theory, he says it's plausible that the scratches on John O'Keefe's arm came from the taillight, which is so important, at least to what the defense has told us potentially is the cause of those being animal bites or maybe even a dog bite.
Or a scratch, or a dog scratch.
That's right. So that seems to be a key moment, was it?
So from my perspective, when I look at this kind of evidence, I'm not convinced. I don't think there's been evidence that it comes from a glass, and I don't think there's been evidence that it comes from an animal. And to me, we're sort of a draw. I know that everybody wants an answer, but oftentimes in criminal cases, in court, we don't actually get an answer. We get to the closest possible theory that each side is presenting. So Trooper Paul is saying, it's plausible that it could have been this. Can I say for certain it is? No. Just like on the other side, they say, oh, it's plausible it could be the dog. Can we say for certain? No. So, you know, you almost have to take it off the table if you can't decide one way or the other.
Well, Sue, let's talk about something that maybe is more unequivocal, and that's about the Google search. The witness who testified today didn't mince any words. He said that Google search happened at 6:23 and 6:24, not 2:27, as the defense has told us it did.
Right, and he basically said what the witness the other day said. We spent a lot of time trying to debunk this Google search. The prosecution has, at least. I don't know if he's getting a check from Jen McCabe on this because he's almost defending her, even though she hasn't been charged with anything, and the jury doesn't even know why we're talking about it, which is a whole nother issue. But, you know, it is sort of, this is a wait till the defense comes up with what they say. We've had two state witnesses that say the search didn't happen. This is how it works. Is the jury able to understand why this happened or how it happened? I don't know how it happened, and I sat through both of those witness testimonies. But it's, do they believe it? Or then again, is it important to them? Some people may not even be considering it.
Yeah, okay. Sue, Catherine, thank you. When we come back, we'll give you a reminder about what's coming up. And of course, if you have a question for any of our experts, send us an email, canton.confidential@nbcuni.com. Tomorrow, court proceedings are scheduled, but without the jury. No court on Wednesday because of the holiday. Thursday is set to be a full day, followed by a half day on Friday. That's it for Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial. See you tomorrow.